HES allies and caregivers. You are listening to our podcast, The Rare Advocates, a caregiver-worthy and rare disease podcast brought to you by Aicardi-Goutieres Syndrome Advocacy Association, where we update you with the latest news and conversations around Aicardi-Goutieres and rare diseases. My name is Betty, producer and marketing director, but most importantly, I'm mom of two little ones. The youngest one, Noah, who was recently diagnosed with Aicardi-Goutieres earlier this year. The stories you're about to hear are close to my heart, and I hope they help you as much as they have helped me. Before we get started on today's episode, a special thanks to Ecamm Live, who gifted us this all-in-one live streaming and video production studio. With Ecamm Live, video creation is easy, professional, and fully customizable. If you can think it, you can create it with Ecamm Live. And don't forget to join the conversation. We're now on all social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and leave a comment or a review wherever you're listening to us from. We're thankful you're here, and we hope we can help you in this journey. In today's episode, we have Kyle, who will be sharing the story of their son Wyatt, who was recently diagnosed with Aicardi-Goutieres Syndrome this January 2022. We will be talking about the diagnosis, treatment obstacles, and present state. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Kyle to the screen. Hi, Kyle. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. I look forward to talking to you. I know these conversations are hard, but I'm very thankful you're here with us today.
Okay. Anything I can share to help is what I'm aiming to do.
Thank you so much, Kyle. So tell me a little bit about when you and your wife started suspecting that there was something going on with Wyatt.
So, right around his second birthday, he was in a daycare program. So, he had been sick a couple of times with some ear infections, but his balance was off a little bit. He started to stumble, fall. So, we weren't sure if it was an inner ear problem or if it was something else. We were seeing, we made an appointment with an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and he did say that he needed tubes. So we were thinking everything was inner ear related. And I guess over a couple of visits, with different ENTs, we saw two different ENTs, and the second one actually said that his symptoms didn't seem like they added up to an inner ear problem. It was something a little bit bigger. So he suggested that we see a neurologist. And we went to a neurologist initially and didn't really have any concrete diagnosis, but then that led to genetic tests. So in between those appointments, we had an ER stay. So there was some issues that we had seen that were kind of leading us that it was maybe a little bit more than inner ear. So I guess that's what led us to the genetic testing, to see if there was something underlying. Because before, actually, at a year, we had a microarray just to I guess cast a wide net over some genetic conditions that for the delays, and that came back clear. The balance issue seemed like it, I guess, got worse, like exponentially, seemingly overnight. So we had an MRI scheduled, but it was a week away. So we decided to go into the ER to see if we could get it a little bit quicker than that week out. We thought something was really going on. And that was last November is when we were in the ER. That's when we got the initial MRI that showed the hyperintensity in the basal ganglia is what they said that was. And that kind of led to some genetic testing.
Yes, and that must have been really tough as a first time parent that, trying to get some answers that would lead up to things, but then seeing things escalate must have been really scary to the point that you were like, you know what, let's go ahead and head to the ER and then leading to the genetic testing.
That ER stay was a 4-day stay. I mean, he had an MRI, he had a lumbar puncture, he had hundreds of blood tests, and we left the ER after 4 days with no concrete diagnosis. I think what was the most traumatic for us was what all of the neurology team was saying could be a potential diagnosis, and that was pretty grim. And I think the worst part about that was kind of how they approached us with those diagnoses, and the diagnoses that they were coming up with were really pretty traumatic for us because it was very grim. And he was still pretty fairly mobile when we were in the hospital, so he could still walk with some assistance, and he was still being able to use his hands. So those those diagnosis ideas from that neurology team was pretty traumatic for us in the ER. Upon discharge, we didn't have any diagnosis, but a referral to see the genetic team for another genetic test, the whole gene sequencing test. So probably within a week of that discharge, we had the whole gene sequencing test between all three of us.
Yeah.
So, and then that process, I mean, everybody knows that process is not a quick process. We waited for a couple of months before we heard anything. I guess his skills diminished over those couple of months until we finally got a diagnosis in January.
So November was the ER stay.
Yeah.
January is when you actually received the diagnosis. How did that
Yeah.
make you feel? How did that make you and your wife feel when you heard the news?
Well, I mean, devastated. Like and part of the devastation with that diagnosis was the genetic team genetic counselor really didn't know anything about it. The traumatic part of this diagnosis was that we didn't really have any support from it seemed like we didn't have any support from the genetic counselor who was supposed to counsel us through a genetic diagnosis. And they just said, hey, we have a diagnosis. Here it is. You're going to end up knowing more about this than us. Good luck, is kind of how the conversation went. So we're sitting here not knowing anything about it, and we're both in the medical field. So what do is we start researching it, and you can go down some rabbit holes and really go to some dark places, pretty quickly especially when it's your child. You, as well as everybody else in this world, knows how isolated you feel when you're trying to, I guess you're trying to learn about it, and you're looking at what's life going to look like now. And it's, you go through that period of adjustment, and that's hard. That's been the hardest part for my wife and I, is just kind of trying to, and we're still learning. We're still learning what the future is going to look like, and kind of how to manage this.
When I'm hearing all these stories, I just think back about my experience, and it's a very scary time. Now, my next question to you is, between January and hearing about the JAK inhibitors, when did you hear about that treatment, and how did you hear about it?
When you're doing this research, Dr. Vanderveer comes up, and clinical trials come up. So you're having to learn about the clinical trial and what that's all about. And about the same time, probably a couple of months into it, my wife found AGS Facebook group, which has been an absolute, it was a game changer for this, because there's so much information on the site, and there's so many knowledgeable people, and it's been an absolute asset for us as a family, having to adjust and having to learn about this. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of great information. For me anyway, it was it seemed like it was way over my head. But what I understood of is that it was the only medication that showed any positive effects on this condition. And with that comes the risks, and but you do your risk benefit analysis, and we're all in this group willing to willing to try anything to make things better for our children. It's a hard process to watch your kid go from being able to do everything to being full assist. So he was running. He was like last Halloween, he was running, he was walking, like he was still doing everything. So it's within a year, he's gone from being able to pretty much do everything except for navigate stairs without a hand to being full assist. He can't sit up, he can't stand, he can't feed himself. That's been a pretty hard process for us to it's been a hard thing for us to process. At 2 years old, your kid can do pretty much anything that they're supposed to be able to do, and now they can't. And watching the frustration in his that he has, because he knew he could, he understands that he was able to do this, um and now he can't. It's heartbreaking.
I'm at a loss for words. I am so
It's
sorry that your family is
no
going through this. January, you got the diagnosis, you do your research, your wife finds the group, and the group that Kyle's talking about is, if you are a newly diagnosed family, please look us up. Although we're not doctors, we have had enough exposure to other doctors, so we point each other in the right direction. We share similar experiences, although AGS has a wide spectrum of different cases. Our kids are not alike, but they're similar. And so we support each other. That's the best word I can use, support each other. So you hear about the JAK inhibitors, and this is around when? Around what month is this?
Yeah, probably around February is when we had a different neurology meeting. So yeah, it was probably February when we decided that that's a path we wanted to navigate.
Yes, I love how you said something that we do almost with all the medicines because they're so young. Yours is, you said, a little bit over 2 years old. So we weight the risk analysis and say,
Yeah.
this is the only treatments out there. Let's go ahead and give it a shot and let's go ahead and proceed. And you decided this with your wife, but now it's acquiring it, right? And getting a hold of this medication. So tell me a little bit about that.
Probably one of the most frustrating processes that I've ever had to go through. So we had our initial neurologist knew about JAK inhibitors for this condition, but he was fairly unfamiliar with protocols and kind of what the process was. So he referred us to a different neurologist, which was Phoenix Children's movement neurologist. That neurology appointment, we saw him in February. I believe it was in February. And for the sole purpose that he knew more about JAK inhibitors for this condition. And that's what we were told by the other neurologist. So we go into this appointment wanting to start that process. I couldn't really get a good feel because we just met with him one time on whether or not he supported this treatment for the condition. Along the way, and this is just my opinion, is that I don't think he really supported the treatment. I guess we know that there's several treatment options, most being just supportive care. And we were wanting to be a little bit more, I guess, aggressive with it to try to slow it down, because we knew from what we were reading is that this medication kind of slowed the progression. We knew it wasn't going to take it. We knew it wasn't going to cure him or stop it. We just wanted to slow it down because we saw such a quick degeneration of his skills, I guess.
Mhm.
Just he lost so many skills so fast. And it's not like one day he was doing this and then tomorrow he wasn't. It kind of was a process. You don't realize when he loses or when they lose this skill versus this skill, and then it'll come back and then it'll kind of leave again. It was just kind of over a relatively short period, he was losing skills and we weren't really noticing when he actually lost them. But at the end of it, we knew that he no longer had them. We were wanting to be fairly aggressive with trying to slow this, to try to retain as many skills as we could. At the end of that appointment, he was saying, the neurologist was saying that, yeah, this is a treatment that we can look at. There's certain risks associated with the treatment, and we were aware of those before the appointment. We had done our research on kind of what the treatment looked like, and we thought that everything was in place, and we knew it was going to be kind of difficult to get the medication through what he said, but he made us feel fairly comfortable that he had done that process several times, is what we thought, with being in the field that he's in, getting medications approved for these kids that were off label. Long story short, we had probably 5 denials over probably almost 5 months. Kind of how long it took us to seek other neurologists. So in that process, we spent hours. I spent hours on the phone with specialty pharmacies, prior authorization departments, insurance company. I mean, I was on the phone for probably at least 15 to 20 hours a week, fighting with them, trying to understand why it was denied, submitted again, and kind of where we were in that process. And there was never a concrete answer about why it was being denied, only that it was off label and it was expensive. From countless hours of conversations, that's the only thing that we were given. The medication is expensive, it's off label for pediatrics. We were looking at other options. We knew that some pharmaceutical companies offer assistance when it's not covered by your insurance, and Lilly has one of those, but it's for adults only. So we were kind of that's another roadblock. So we couldn't get any financial assistance from Lilly because he's under 18. It's off label, so the insurance company says we're not gonna cover it. So and we have piles of information. We have hundreds of pages of basically anything that was written on AGS and the use of JAK inhibitors. We had printed out. We'd read them. We had highlighted, and we had it ready to submit. And we're still in the process with the local neurologist. Local neurologist said, no, don't, we don't need any of your information. We're gonna, they submitted, and probably about 4 months into the denial processes, the insurance company finally told me that the neurologist wasn't submitting adequate information to get an approval. And that just floored me. They said he only submitted, I think, 2 single patient case studies, and it wasn't adequate information, which 4 months into this, I'm wondering if it's the insurance company that's causing the issues. And while yes, the insurance company has their portion of this, I think that another portion was from our neurology team, and that was unacceptable to me.
Yeah. Well,
that
how
that
frustrating.
and all the while we're watching Wyatt just regress. These regressions are just, you can't stop it. And that's what the frustrating part was, is there's a medication that could potentially slow this down and we can't get it. And I didn't really have a, before this, we all know how insurance works, and we work hard to get our insurance benefits, and we always think that insurance is there for our benefit, but it really did show me that the process is a little bit different than just that. It and that was also pretty hard for me to digest, is that it's a business, and they're in this business to make money, and this is it's an expensive medication, and I learned quite a bit through this process. That
And for those who are listening to us that have not gone through this or don't have to go through this, every single time you talk, you're talking to a different person. So you're almost
yeah,
having to present the case all over again. Not only that, they probably never heard about AGS.
no,
And they're
it's yeah.
hearing the kid's age, and that's even more alarming to them. And so it's really frustrating because it's not like you're assigned a case manager where they're going to be like, you know what, we're going to take care of you from here on out. And it's frustrating now that you know it was part with the medical professional and part with the insurance, and you're, like you say, you're at home already dealing with other symptoms that he's
Yeah.
having, and you're just having, not on top of that, you have your other responsibilities such as work and so forth. And it's not the only medication, and that's important for those who are listening to us. It's multiple medications, but this was a key medication. Like you said, it's not a cure, but it's the treatment that has shown some results that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And that's really frustrating. So you're 5 months in trying to get this approval, and you find out that it's not all insurance, it's also medical. What did you and your wife decide to do at this point?
In that process, I kind of skipped over this. We went to Philadelphia and went to and saw the folks at CHOP. So that appointment, I believe, was in March or April. So we were already deep into the process of trying to get prescribed JAK inhibitors, and we kind of thought it was all set before our trip to Philly, but that kind of fell through. I it was a confusing process. So we thought we had a prescription for it when we went to our appointment in Philly. We came back from Philly not having a prescription for it. So we kind of it was confusing, and then we felt like we needed to start over. So we were having the same roadblocks. So I reached out to Patrick, and Patrick reached out to Devin, who is on the West Coast, um, and was seeing a neurologist at Children's Hospital LA. And it's a little bit easier for us to drive to LA than it is for us to fly to Philly. They kind of cut some red tape, some waiting, and we actually we were fast tracked to see Dr. Santoro. And within a few weeks of reaching out to Patrick, we had an appointment and we saw Dr. Santoro, which has been a game changer. He understands the use of JAK inhibitors for this condition. He's got at least one patient. I don't know about any others, but I know that he's got at least one. Devin was just the piece that we needed to see him, and she's been an advocate. So is everybody else from this site, but those are the two that kind of put us in contact with Dr. Santoro, who within a few weeks of that appointment, we had a prescription for 4 milligrams of berry, which is not really where we want it to be, but some is better than none. So within a few weeks of that appointment, it was still a process, but I think they were a little bit more familiar with it, and they submitted the right information, and he was an advocate for the the treatment. So we had started, and my wife has all of this documented when we started, but I know that we're about 5 months into our treatment in total. So we started with 4 milligrams, and we were on 4 milligrams for 3 months. And we just started, we're probably 2 months into 6 milligrams now. So because he was significantly lighter in weight when we first started, because he had stopped eating. So he wasn't eating anymore, and he had lost weight, which was kind of concerning to us. We were fairly close to a feeding tube probably, but we were working with a GI doctor here who was able to prescribe us nutrition shakes, which have been a game changer. We started gaining weight with the nutrition shakes, which took a load of stress off of meal times, because he was down to eating like one or two different things, and just wasn't, I mean, he selectively stopped eating the stuff that he didn't think he could eat. So this global weakness, this neuromuscular weakness, it's the swallow is affected by it too. Your swallow, your chew, everything is affected by this neuromuscular regression. So he was no longer wanting to eat solid foods, but the nutrition shakes that we were prescribed ended up fulfilling a majority of his caloric needs for the day. So we started gaining more weight back, and it was a game changer. We were just really fortunate that he still had the ability to use a straw, and he was still able to swallow that liquid, which was like for quite a while, of several weeks, was a majority of his calories were through those nutrition shakes.
That's scary. And you said something that's key. Uh, if you're unfamiliar with AGS, you may have seen maybe pictures and you see kids with some physical disabilities, but it affects also internally, those internal muscles as well, such as the skills of eating and swallowing. And it's scary for any caregiver to know that, you know, one day they could be eating and the next day they might lose that skill. So I'm glad that Wyatt is able to feed now in a different way. Maybe it's not the solid food route, but it's not the G-tube route. So that's
Oh,
also.
and he's back to eating a majority of the solid foods. Like we noticed almost immediately starting the medication that his appetite came back. His
So let me
um
ask that question. Let me ask that question.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
actually my next question. How did you know that the treatment started working?
So it was really scary. So I kind of skipped over this, but right before we started his treatment, he got COVID. So probably during the process, we'd already seen Santoro, but we were in the process of trying to get an approval for the medication, and he got COVID, and he got COVID pretty significantly. And we were noticing a lot of regressions with that illness. We had a hard time controlling his fever with it for over a week. And I was really, really concerned. I reached out to Patrick. I'm like, hey, we were panicking that he was he was super sick, and we saw this regression, like this major regression starting. And probably a week after COVID is when we started Barry, which I I wish we had gotten an approval before, because maybe we wouldn't have lost the skills that we did. But we noticed almost immediately, those 2, 3, 4 days into it, we noticed global changes. We noticed that everything started, like his dexterity started to improve, his diet or his appetite started to improve. And I was texting Patrick just almost daily that we were noticing different changes, these global changes. And he's like, yeah, that's, it's not guaranteed that all kids are going to have that, but we've seen that with a majority of the kids that start this medication is they have those global improvements, those changes. You can see that over the first few days, you should start to notice some differences. And I tell you, for the first couple of weeks, he's never been as chill and relaxed and like what a no I don't want to say what a normal um child would be like, but we noticed a huge difference in his irritability, and we weren't sure if that was because he was still trying to recover from COVID or if it was the medication was actually doing its job. So within the first couple of months, we noticed that he was almost back to where he was before he got sick. And because right before he got COVID was his first day on the treadmill at physical therapy and the harness, and he just did so good. And we were excited about that. And then he got really sick, and then after that he started to scissor his legs a little bit more, and we noticed that there was definitely some physical symptoms that were lingering. So we're still dealing with the scissoring, we're still dealing with that, but for a lot of it, a lot of those symptoms had started to go back to before he was sick with COVID.
So, having the treatment, seeing the improvements, finally getting the approval, how did that make you and your wife feel? What was
Well,
going through
well,
y'all's minds?
well, it made us feel hopeful, but at the same time, it made us feel like we lost a chunk of time where we could have maybe seen less regression. And you you can't help but think that you can't help but think, what if we had this medication 6 months ago? What if we had this, what if we knew about it and it was easier to get, and if it wasn't such a process, and more maybe more genetics teams knew about it and kind of where to steer you. Like, we felt like we were on an island from the beginning, having to do all of our own research and having to be Wyatt's advocate, because there's really we felt like we were caregivers as well as his only advocates. And all parents, especially in with conditions such as this, that's what you feel like you have to split your time between parenting and caregiving, parenting, and advocating. While we were seeing all of these improvements, you can't help but think, what if we got this 6 months ago? Where would we be? And that's a hard place to be. That's you know that's that's a dark place. You're like, well, what if? But and you can't. You have to try not to think like that, and it's hard.
Yeah.
But I'm fortunate that we were, able to start when we did, and I just wish it wasn't so much of a process, because it was a very emotional process.
You mentioned something key. Well, everything you're mentioning, it brings feelings, and I'm sure other listeners can agree with this, because one, you hear about this treatment, then you can't get it, then you finally see it. You have it at your house. You finally see improvements. And improvements, when we talk about the AGS world, it might be, like he starts to be himself, maybe like we mentioned, he's not walking, but you see things, you're like, oh, this is hopeful, we
Mm-hmm.
we see improvements, and here comes the scary reality, and that's, well, what if we don't have the medication tomorrow? And that's also a different dark place, that unfortunately it's scary because it's not it's not a guaranteed approval, right?
No, no,
So
and that's I don't, and we're dealing with that as we speak. So it's, as of yesterday, the insurance company has delayed our our refill, and we only got a 6 month prior authorization, and we're at month 5. I don't know what happened with the prior authorization when we got the dose increase, but the insurance company said that we should have 2 weeks access of pills, so they're delaying the delivery by a week, and that's not the case. And having to manage that, and I have to be on the phone now tomorrow trying to get medication because we're going to run out, and it's not a medication that you can start and stop. And that's, and when you don't have a guarantee that it's, we waited 5-6 months to get the initial prescription approved, and now we've had it for 6 months, and tomorrow I don't know if we're going to get the medication that we need until they send us, the his next, and they wouldn't send us multiple months, so we have to we have to we have to trust in the mail system and the delivery system that we're going to get the medication month to month. So it's not like we get 6 months and we have a guaranteed 6 months of medication. We get it every month. Yeah, they send it to us a week or so ahead of time, but we have to, what if it gets lost in the mail? What if it there, there's a lot of stress involved in, and once you have, there's stress up to getting the medication, and then once you get the medication, the stress doesn't stop. Then you have to worry, at the 3 month mark, if you have a 6 month prior authorization, you have to worry about, well, now I have to start the process all over again, and I have to kind of think about what happens when they deny it. And so there's a lot of stress that's involved in it, but we as parents in this world know that this is the only medication that these kids can take that shows a positive effect for this condition. So
yeah,
it's,
this is our, unfortunately, our reality. But it doesn't need to be like this. That's the also the the thing that's most frustrating. It does not have to be like this, but it is like this, and it does not have to be like this if we had support from pharmaceuticals, for one. You know.
yeah. So and we're parents, and like desperate parents to to get this in any way we can. But you look at how much it costs, and I asked the pharmacy how much it costs if I pay cash, and it's $12,000 a month. And I don't know, there's not very many people that have an extra $12,000 a month just sitting around. It makes it unattainable, without the benefits that we work so hard to get. So that's a frustrating part, because I thought about that. It's like, well, I know how much you're billing, but if I pay cash, is it any less? And they're like, no. If you want to pay for it out of your pocket, it's $11,992 or whatever they said. So, and there again, it makes it unattainable even for two people with really good with decent jobs, you
Yes,
know.
yes.
So that's just a frustrating part, and
I
makes it.
know. And Kyle, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this now. It's something I do not wish you had to deal with.
Well, and what this is, and we're not alone. Like, this is not like an isolated incident. This is there's documented incidents that, within our group, that are exactly like this.
Yes.
It's not just us.
Yes, exactly.
It's so.
So if we would if we have any medical professionals or insurance employers that their job is to help with approval process, and they were listening to this podcast, what would you like to say with them, or what would you wish they understood? What would be your words to them?
Well, I guess first and foremost, the people that are sitting behind the desk making the decisions whether or not they're going to cover it or not, put yourselves in our shoes. Put yourselves in the shoes of parents that need to get medication for their children that they can't get. It's you feel so helpless that this is the only thing that can help your child. And it's I begged the people that I was talking to for hours on the phone to try to put themselves in our position, when all they're doing is they're putting your situation into an algorithm on whether or not they're going to say yes or no. And when they say, well, it's off label, so the answer is no, that to me is like, I guess where it need, and this the survey that we sent out or the petition that we sent out for signatures to get Lilly to consider meeting with the FDA and trying to get the classification changed for children. It's so incredibly frustrating hearing adult protocols that are approved for this medication. It's so frustrating that those are approved, and we can't get this medication for our children that have a neuromuscular degenerating condition that's going to render them totally helpless. And it's just unreal to me that there's not more consideration to try to make this more attainable for this population. I understand it's a small population, but it's a population that desperately needs this medication.
Yes, yes. No, I agree with everything you said, and I really hope that if anyone out there is listening to this podcast, they can really um, think about how they can help us prior to just plugging it into the algorithm. If they can go a little bit above and beyond to help us, I would really ask them to please consider that. Now, let me ask you, what about the parents who are newly diagnosed, the parents who just got the diagnosis of their kid? What words of wisdom or advice would you give to them as they're hearing those devastating news that you and I have both heard about our kids?
I guess just understand that there's going to be a lot of ups and downs with this, but there's so many knowledgeable people that have been there before, and that's what's helped us, is that there's people in this group that are so well educated in this condition and the treatment protocols, and while this world is small, there's so many people that can offer, assistance through experience. And just to yeah, I guess just to stay positive.
Yeah, it's tough out there, but um, unfortunately, um, unfortunately, you're not the only one out there that's going through this. So seek for those who are going through similar situations, and we'll share experiences. And just like Kyle got some help from the community, if anyone can lend you a hand, we will lend you a hand and assist you in any way we can, because we don't want you to be going through this. That's our wish. We really wish you were not going through this. And the last question I have for you, Kyle, is if your wife, if your son, if anyone close to you that you have today were to listen to this podcast, do you have any words to say to them in regards to your journey and Wyatt's journey?
Oh, I mean, this journey would be impossible without my wife. I mean, she has just been a rock, and it's it's a hard journey, and you just need a lot of support, and it's you have to lean on each other. You have to lean on the ones that support you. And I just want to thank everybody in this community. Has just been an asset, and just very thankful for everybody.
Kyle, I'm really thankful you shared your story today. And I'm sorry we're meeting this way, but now you can
Oh, it
count on my now you can count on me for anything. Now you
yeah.
know who I am.
Yep.
And I mentioned this prior to jumping on this video with you to my audience, that the stories that we're sharing, they're really close to our hearts, because we're going through um, very similar paths, and we don't wish this on anybody. And we feel for each other's kids so much. We see each other's kids on other families, with other families. So I'm thankful that you're taking time out of your busy day, because, like you said, we have limited time. But I'm thankful that you're taking the time to speak to other parents, to speak to other professionals, and share your story. And I really hope that Wyatt gets his medication as soon as possible. Overnight delivery, rushed,
Yeah. Yeah.
prioritized. We know all the keywords, right?
Yeah.
Because he needs it. He needs it, and I haven't met Wyatt yet, but maybe I will in the future.
Okay. I can. Do you want to meet him? I can go and get him.
If he's up for it. If he's not, then
Yeah.
don't worry
I'll
about it. Hi, Wyatt.
say hi. This is Wyatt.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
He's so precious.
Yes,
If you're
hi, guys.
just listening to this, you have to go on the video and watch Wyatt. He's gorgeous.
Say hi.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Hi.
Wyatt, it's so nice to meet you.
Say it's nice to meet you. Say thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And for those of you listening, you have to watch the video. He's precious. And Kyle, please thank your wife for the time as well. And we'll be in touch, okay?
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye, Wyatt.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.